Jed, and welcome to another episode of Essential Artists. Today we're going to be looking at the airbrush paintings of the graphic novelist Richard Corben. He is most famous for his Bat Out of Hell album cover for the band Meatloaf, but was a comic book illustrator by trade. Richard Corben, also known as Gore, was born in 1940 and graduated the Kansas City Art Institute in 1965. Although he first worked as an animator for Calvin Productions in Kansas City, Richard Corben started illustrating underground comics on his own, and by 1970 eventually started working on mainstream titles such as Creepy, Eerie, and Vampirilla. It wasn't until 1975 that his underground stories finally got noticed, when he submitted some of his stories to the newly formed Metal Hurlant magazine in France, then continued working on the American version called Heavy Metal magazine when they started publishing here in the States in 1977. Richard Corben started his own publishing company in 1986 called Phantagora, which allowed him to make graphic novels out of his titles such as Rippin' Time, about a police officer who chases a kidnapper through a time machine back to the time of dinosaurs, and Den, the character he had developed in the French comic Metal Hurlant, who was a bald, muscle-bound hero who shockingly appeared completely naked and routinely made love to incredibly voluptuous women. As a kid, I remember how taboo it was to see an issue of Heavy Metal featuring a Den story. That's why they'd keep them behind the counter with the Playboys. It was an adult comic book, but the average parent in 1978 called it pornography, which led to several contentious interviews where Richard Corben had to defend his art, which was always meant for an adult audience. He had been a professional bodybuilder and admired the human form, male and female, and called his work sensual. I'll admit it, as a 12-year-old, Den was pretty friggin' sexy, but it was still just art. What about Michelangelo's David? Is that pornographic? I love Corben's work, for he was a technical master, and along with Roger Dean and Moebius, was the inspiration for me to try my hand at airbrushing. The 1981 animated film Heavy Metal features a segment on Den, but John Candy's voice was too comedic, and the artwork doesn't properly convey how good Richard Corben's artwork really was, because there was no way to animate Corben's signature airbrush style, requiring 12 separate images a second for animation. That would have been impossible. Richard Corben continued his career in comics for the next 30 years, working for both Marvel and DC, and for Dark Horse Comics on titles such as Hellboy, The Punisher, Cage, Bloodstar, and Conan the Barbarian. Like always, if you find this artist's work interesting, you should do your own research. Find these paintings for yourself and study them firsthand, because they deserve more than just 4 seconds of screen time. This video is merely meant to be an introduction into the vast scope of Richard Corben's career. With all that out of the way, let's take a look at the artwork of Richard Corben.